All right, what's going on, everyone? Really excited for today's conversation. I've got Kevin Davis. He doesn't want me to call him a RevOps guru, but this guy's been in revenue operations and sales operations for a long time. Decided that he was fed up with some of the things that were going on in RevOps and started a company to help to optimize. We'll call it like sales and revenue efficiency, specifically around teams.
Yeah.
And today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do you build a modern revenue team in 2025? I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, man, since the days of like, you got an SDR and a salesperson success and you do your territory this way, we've kind of been doing things very similarly, for a long time. So I'm excited for the conversation. Hopefully you're going to get a lot out of this as well. Kevin, thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks so much for doing this in person. It's great to see
Yeah,
you.
isn't it fun, man? Like to actually do it, like you're like sitting across. It is also, I think like we're so used to Zoom too. It's also like, oh, there's like a real person here.
Yeah.
Like I can't turn my camera off.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, especially like I know you from like YouTube, LinkedIn. Like I've seen you, but now it's real.
Yeah, it's like I'm a real person.
You're real.
Okay, good.
Baked
good.
on that
It's like, yeah, it's not like pure AI. Like there's like AI Jake and this Jake. So yeah, Kevin, feel free, man. Talk a little bit about yourself, your background, and, hopefully I explained it decently, but, how you landed to become, CEO and, the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. I started, well, first off, I'm from a small town in Wisconsin, so I'm a Midwest
There we go.
guy. I went to the University of Wisconsin.
All right.
There. And then I started working for a software company after college called NetSuite, which you may have heard of.
I think people have heard of NetSuite.
And I was your classic like BDR training program. I moved to Boston. I had never been to Boston. I started just making a bunch of dials and emails, and I didn't know this at the time, but it was a great software that was taking off.
Yeah.
And so I was able to just kind of navigate through sales. And so I became an account manager, and then a direct seller. Eventually moved over here to Austin. And that company was doing great, and so great that they were acquired by Oracle for a lot of money. And at that time, Google Cloud was becoming a thing. This was when like AWS was owning that market, and Google Cloud was setting up shop here in Austin. So I came over to Google Cloud and started selling for them, and then went into sales leadership, sales operations. I moved to Europe for a while.
What made you make the move to operations? Like, what was it for you? Because I think a lot of people don't make that move. They just keep climbing the sales leadership. What was it? Why make the move?
Yeah, I had always been of that bend, like a little more type A analytical. Like people would tell me that I was of that variety.
Okay.
But really, I needed to move. I had to move back from Europe because I was having my son, and we just wanted to come back home. But Google had just put on a hiring freeze. And the only job that was open to get us back home was an operations job.
Interesting.
And the kind of timing of it all, it was like, you know what? I'll do this. Let's see where it goes. And I did it, and I ended up loving it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you quit eventually. And what made you want to start Boogie Board?
Yeah, I quit because I mostly wanted to start a company.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I tried a lot of silly things. I tried to start a Christmas tree company.
A Christmas tree company?
Yeah, I actually.
That's like a racket. Isn't that like a mafia type thing? Like where they've got like the one people in like North Carolina and other places like own that business?
So yes, and I wanted to break that down. I didn't know that at the time. My view of the problem was like, if you have an artificial Christmas tree, do you have one?
No, I have a real. We do the real.
Okay.
Yeah, we do the real thing. You know what I mean? I got kids.
I respect that. But if you have an artificial one, it takes up like an incredible amount of space.
Right.
And it's made with all these like disgusting materials based on what you were just talking about there. So I was like, there's an opportunity to disrupt this. All of a sudden, I'm on Alibaba, like trying to figure out
how to drop ship this stuff.
Yeah, and it was just like the worst.
Yeah, you quit immediately.
Yeah,
I saw one on Shark Tank. It was like this thing was like a hoop. You just like pulled it up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So all right, so you didn't get into that. So why was this the problem? Like why was this the tech? Why was this the thing that you wanted to do?
When I had first become a sales leader, I had a guy on my team that was like super earnest, and it was territory planning season, and he got his list of accounts, and he just was like, these accounts like suck. They're not real.
Yeah.
And he told me this, and I was like, okay, oh, you're right. He did the work. However many hundreds of accounts, one by one. This domain is bullshit. This one's bullshit. Like it doesn't work, and I could do nothing about it. And I had been a rep.
Sure.
Yeah, and I had complained about my territory, but I got to like see how the sausage was made, and I was like, this is not working. And so when I was an entrepreneur, just kind of looking for a problem, it was like, oh yeah, that was really
Interesting.
unique.
Yeah. All right. So territory. So talk a little bit about the company and what the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, so we started, so I left, I started doing a bunch of consulting to design territories for as many companies as I could. And what we found was that the people that were actually having to do the work, like, it was really hard. They were being put in a really bad position.
That's right.
Because they're in a spreadsheet moving one account, one state from this person to another. Sales team is the one who's wanting those things, but it's not really able to participate in the process. So we said, what if we could build a suggestion engine, based on your market data, which is exploding. Companies are all trying to figure out how to get more, better market data, and your team structure, your team attributes, and Boogie Board could suggest a way to design territories. It would take a lot of that manual work out of the process, and that's how we got started.
That's cool, man. Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of companies struggle with because, again, they just do it the way that they've done it, and their boss taught them how to do it, et cetera. So let's jump into the team stuff. So again, you get a chance to see a lot of different revenue organizations. What are some of the trends or things that you're seeing for 2025 when you think about how we build high-performing revenue teams?
Yeah, the word is focus. That's what I use. If you look at any grid of like sales intelligence platforms or data providers, like, it's exploded.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone is trying to get the right market data so that they can orient around that. I think of territories and team structure as a way of doing that. Capital's more expensive now. People are more expensive now. There's tooling available to help you be more efficient. So I think that's the question a lot of companies are asking themselves. How can I focus my team on the right accounts more often?
Yeah, I mean, we hear that a lot, right? And then you see, a lot of it's like intent data, right? It's like, hey, like, we invested in 6 Sense or Demand Base or Terminus, whatever you invested in. So how do you think about those types of signals? Intent to me is it's a signal. The issue I have sometimes with it is it's all third-party, data. It's not your own even first-party data. So how do you think about intent as a part of this? And, does it fit with, kind of how you guys think about things? Is it a part of the equation? How do you think about intent? Because I feel like that's like all the rage that I hear about now.
Yeah, it definitely is. People are talking about it all the time because you used to have, there's inbound and then there's outbound.
Yeah.
Right? And this is a lead and then this is what you're going after. And it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Now you have this spectrum on which something is a lead. And it could be that someone went to your website once.
Right.
It could be that someone is actively reading content that you've published online. And so thinking about how to bring that into team structures can be complicated. You can bring it into a book like you would a lead if you think it reached a certain criteria, but you have to have a pretty sophisticated data structure to do that. So I think it's shrinking the intent that you're looking at to a few good signals.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And then just kind of starting there and saying, like, let's bring these in, let's treat them as high priority, like leads almost, and then build out the strategy to the point where we say, okay, what is the tipping point for intent that we know we need to go after someone?
Yeah, and is that something, again, are you seeing tools that exist that can help with that, like in terms of honing in on just the top 2 or 3? Because, again, we've got lots and lots of companies that use these tools, and sometimes there's almost like an over-reliance on them because, again, for those of you that don't know, a lot of these intent tools, how it works, especially like the third-party intent, it's like they've got all the IP addresses for different companies and then the departments within those companies. And so, the intern at IBM could have consumed an article on territory management, and all of a sudden it's like IBM high intent. So there's a lot of false signals in this as well too. There's a lot of good signals. We have a lot of companies that use it, and we can look at the data of like, before, pure cold outbound, after, and there is a needle move. Are there tools or things that you can think about whenever people are, trying to say, hey, out of all this noise, or are there consistent, I guess like trigger points you see?
That's a good question. I honestly, no. Like, I think most companies are doing this wrong. They're over-indexing on intent and then reorienting themselves too quickly. So the companies that I think have the best way of conceptualizing it is they've got a really clean implementation of their customer profile to start.
Right.
And so they say, we know the right companies. Because if IBM's a target for you and the intern is doing something and it's a really clear company that you want to work with, then by all means, go.
Sure, of course.
Talk to that intern. But if, some random company is just on your website and it's going to distract you, then no. But no, I see more companies getting it wrong than doing it.
Right, yeah. And I think, too, the other thing I see is like it's like pitched to the sales org as this like silver bullet almost, right? And then the sales team is like, well, this isn't really much better. And it can create a lot of issues as well too. So focus again. So what I hear is focus in on the ICP, focus on, the persona. And then what about, there's focusing, right, in each role. What about the alignment, right? How do you think about, again, what we're seeing, and it all plays into this, again, you talked about inbound and outbound, is marketing is being asked to do more, right? Marketing is going deeper into the funnel or being asked to go deeper. And again, we still have a lot of the same problems around like sales and marketing alignment. So how do you kind of balance those things? How do you think about, when companies are, looking ahead 2025, how do you think about helping to better align those groups? Because I still feel like it's such an issue, man, and it's something we just keep talking about it over and over again.
Yeah, I think the most interesting development in that world is leadership structure changes. The emergence of the CRO, to some extent the CSO, the Chief Sales Officer, and where marketing fits in that picture. So one of the things that I use in my ideal customer profile is, can this company think as forward as I need them to think about territories from an alignment standpoint? Will they be able to handle this? And the way that I do that is by saying, if they have a CRO that has some type of background in data or operations or has touched marketing, and so they're not just coming up through this single-threaded approach, and if they have that, it makes me think that they're probably more aligned with their systems, with their teams internally. So I think it really all starts at the top.
Okay. All right. So you've got these new roles. How are you seeing people, again, how are you seeing these organizations, I guess, glue this together? So again, so it sounds like, for you on the sales side, it's, making sure, again, you're going that next level of making sure I've got the right type of person. Those types of persona categories, we call those X factors. And every company, when they're doing persona work or ICP work, if it's more on the company side, you should always be thinking about what's the X factor. What is, another part too is it's funny, I was sitting with a client, this is 2 weeks ago, and, they're talking about, but this person, this person. I said, guys, it's called ideal customer, ICP, not just customer profile, right? And so a lot of this is, using those X factors, like you said. And is that what you think the gap is? Is do you just think marketing and sales, marketing is trying to open the aperture, and sometimes maybe sales is trying to close it? What do you feel is the gap in the companies that you're working with that are doing this right? How are sales and marketing working together?
Yeah, and it starts right there with the ICP. And so I'll ask, what is your ideal customer profile? And they'll show me a Google Doc that says a few things. And it'll be, the sales will have a Google Doc. They might have a slide if they're fancy.
Yeah, sure.
And then marketing will have a Google Doc. And they're not the same. And so what we see is that the ICP is not actually implemented. It's just existing. And so if there's not a single source of truth on the ICP, you can't really rally around it. So I think that's where it stems from.
I think that's right. Yeah, and I think, again, we do this, we call it our customer journey, alignment conversation, where we get everyone aligned on kind of the steps that need to happen in the process too. And to your point, it kind of starts at the top of how are we going to choose who we engage with or not to go down this customer journey. So, all right, that's a little bit around marketing, sales. Now let's talk a little bit about operations and sales, right? I'll tell you from the work that we do, I think the most common thing that we try to do is we try to make sure that operations and enablement are aligned to the strategic sales goals. That operations isn't just answering a bunch of tickets, enablement's creating a bunch of content. And I would say nearly 100% of the time when we come into a company, these two groups do not have a shared roadmap.
No.
Right? They've got their roadmap. Ops has got theirs. So how do you think about getting operations, and then we can start there, operations and sales aligned?
Yeah, I think it starts with kind of what we were just talking about, which is the clear goals, and then the ability for operations to be future looking. And I think that takes a cultural shift a lot of the times. Because salespeople, if they come and join your company, they might be used to operations or enablement being a service to them.
That's right. They're tactical, right? That's what they're used to, right? They're used to oh yeah, those are the guys who do my reports, and they help me roll out outreach.
Exactly. And so again, it goes back to that leadership thing. It's are you a leader who can make that cultural distinction and bang that in front of your sales team and say, no, you're using them wrong. You can let them lead you and have a great partnership with them. So I think it's a cultural thing that comes from the top.
I agree. The other thing I see too is just a lot of like the RevOps people, and again, I don't want to like wave a wand here, but one of the gaps I think is also like a talent or skill gap sometimes on the RevOps side, where RevOps is just so used to being relegated to ticket doer. You know, it like we had, this is maybe a couple months ago. I remember I was on a call and, you know, private equity backed company, and they're like, well, you know, I was like, they had a RevOps team of a couple people. I was like, how do you look at success? And they're like, well, you know, some of our KPIs are like number, like we look at number of like tickets answered. We look at, there was something else. I was like, well, how we think about RevOps is performance. Like, what was the thing that we set out to improve over the last, you know, 3 to 6 to 12 months? And did we drive sales? But again, I'm not going to say 100%, but I got to tell you, man, like most of them are not there. They're just like, what? Well, I can't, you know, it's like almost like I can't impact this. So, you know, maybe let's get tactical. Like, what are some of the ways that operations can better work with sales? And then maybe too, I mean, look, for me, the KPIs are revenue KPIs. Like if the projects we're working on are supposed to, you know, decrease the sales cycle, did we do that, right? But how do you think about the ops teams like doing a better job potentially of aligning?
Yeah, I talk about treating operations like a 5th grade math test. Like you have to show your work, because if it all happens behind a curtain, nobody is really going to understand. Like sales teams haven't done that. They don't know all that you're doing. And then you have this like misalignment that we're talking about. So I'm really big on setting up internal websites that clearly show, here are the projects that we're working on. Here's how they're mapped to different KPIs. We have templates that we use to help RevOps teams kind of elevate themselves in the conversation. And it feels like fluffy to talk about internal comms on, you know, websites, but we just kept having problems with it. We like had to break this down. Like, no, you need to communicate better and build internal websites, build tools that like voice what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah. All right. So giving them a seat at the table, right? Or like helping to elevate them.
Yeah.
How did, like, again, if it starts at the top too with like the sales leaders, maybe to flip the question then, what can sales leaders do to elevate this role? Because again, I feel like even a lot of sales leaders, they're just not, like to them, it's almost like a foreign concept where it's like they don't even know how to use like the ops team, right? Because they're so used to like, well, what do you mean the seat at the table, right? So what are some like tactical things you think that a sales leader can do to like start to move down that path?
I think the one like low-hanging fruit is to become really good at whatever systems that you use. You're going to have to in your career anyways now. Like it's pretty clear.
100%. I mean, like just like if you are a sales leader, like you cannot outsource your knowledge of these tools. It's crazy to me, man. And we'll talk, obviously we'll get into the Gen AI stuff later, but I'm shocked. I'm like, your team, because here's the thing, most sales leaders grew up, they know how to use Salesforce.
Yeah.
Right? So you learn Salesforce, but now you've got 6 tools in your tech stack at least, right? Yeah. And it's like, they still like, let's take like the sales engagement space, right? Like Outreach, Sales Loft, Gong, like whatever.
Yeah.
Most of them are like, they know what the tool could do in like 2018.
Yeah.
And it's like all these tools have expanded and these sales leaders just are not investing time. You know, I've got kind of a time management principle for leadership I call 80-15-5, which is like 80% of your time is focused on doing things that are going to impact your business in the next 1 to 3 months. 15% of your time is things maybe 3, 6, 9 months. And 5% of your time has got to be dedicated to like, what are the things that I need to know that are going to move the needle on the business in 9, 12, 24 and plus months. And, you know, when leaders come to me, I'm like, look, you should be taking demos. Take a demo.
Yeah.
Like go learn about this stuff because, right, you're going to continue to orchestrate teams the same way you've done it. It's like, dude, why are they doing that, right? There's a lot of tools right now like data entry in Salesforce, right? To me, like that's a classic example where, you know, you've got, there's a lot of tools right now. There's a bunch of them. Attention.tech is one we've been messing with. Momentum, Gong has like some of the capabilities now too, where it'll just listen to the call and auto log the stuff for you, you know, like. And I just feel like, again, so many sales leaders aren't doing that, right? So that's my high horse for a little bit. So obviously, like, make time for the tech. What else?
Make time for the tech. I agree with taking demos because I think that's another way of, like, seeing how other people are selling. There are probably elements of your sales process that you can eliminate which are technically related, right? And content related. And so those will help you to kind of engage with the other areas of your business. If I'm taking a demo and it's from a 5-person shop who has to operate extremely efficiently, like I'm going to get a totally different experience than if I got 100 sales reps, I have a qualification call, I have a demo, like you're just going to see like, oh, wow, okay, my mind is blown.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and again, a lot of people are just not, I think, paying attention to it. I think, again, like there's just, I don't feel like there's a sense of like, enough sense of urgency right now from sales leadership, just really understanding how quickly our world is changing. I was speaking at a conference in New York last week, and one of the speakers before me, what he said is right now where technology is and what it's capable of, right? And particularly we were talking about Gen AI. It is 2 years ahead of what we can actually use it for.
Okay.
Like our brain cannot comprehend like these use cases. And so I've been kind of making the rounds with a lot of these PE conferences talking about Gen AI and like the tactical applications of it. And you can just see like our brains, we're just not used to interacting with tech this way. Like we don't know, like, no, keep going. It's not like, oh, I've got enough, let me go start. Like, no, keep like noodling. Like, you know, you keep going, right, as a part of it. So I think that's a great kind of transition. Like how can technology like better facilitate collaboration? You know, are there tools and platforms, you know, that you've seen like be really effective? You talked about, you know, kind of the like proactivity and some of those. So are there tools or platforms or processes you've seen that can help to facilitate some of this?
Yeah, we love using Notion. I love using, you know, Canva, Figma. Momentum is incredible.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah.
I think a lot of this stuff centers around like the way that we need to communicate now is a much more like natural way of communicating. Like it's the way we communicate in our personal lives. We're moving towards that. So as a company, like I think about how can I just create like really, really beautiful content, like really clean communication, and doing that internally is also going to help you align on messaging and think through what you're doing. So those are some like tools I use in the
talk about Figma in particular, because I think like, look, if you're in like the dev wireframe type world, you know Figma. I mean, Figma's, you know, like the Canva for that type of world. But how are you guys using Figma in particular? I'm interested.
We use it for all of our brand assets, all of our design work for our website, for you know, wireframing our product, our SaaS product. We're using it for just general like graphics. Like my chief product officer, one of my co-founders, just in there all the time. Like I remember when I first started, it was great because I quit my job. I thought I was like a forward-thinking like tech guy. I didn't know anything. I was on the phone. My sister's a designer. She's super busy, and I'm calling her like late at night, like, "Hey, I'm trying to do this thing in Figma," and she's just like, "You're an idiot." But we got there. You know, we're there now. We use it all the time.
That's cool, man. Yeah, and again, it goes back to it's just like. There is a lot of tech, don't get me wrong, like, and it can be difficult. You know, maybe talk a little bit about process versus tech handling a solution. What I mean by that is a lot of times what I see companies doing is investing in technology, right? And Figma to me is a good example. You know, you've got Figma, Canva, like, oh, we've got this problem. Let's invest in this tech.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of times it doesn't solve shit because that wasn't the issue. How do you, you know, if you're a leader, how do you know if you have a tech problem, where there's like an efficiency gain potentially, or you've got a process problem?
Yeah, I think I kind of rarely think there's like a tech problem per se. Like we don't adapt to the technological needs. Like I think it's a misunderstanding of like the problems that you have as a business generally. And so like companies that talk to me, I'd be really interested to get your take on this, that talk about their AI strategy and it's how they buy tech. I don't really understand that because to me, it's like, if you're buying tech because you think it's AI, it doesn't necessarily make sense. But the ones who have a clear mapping of like, this is what we're trying to do. And it's hard because you're not going to know your problem. That's what the vendor is supposed to do. Like when we talk
hypothetically, yes.
Yeah, right. They never actually do. But so I think the ones that focus on like business problems really fundamentally and derive things from there are the ones that do it right.
That's right. So if you're listening, if you're using one tool and it's not effective, I'm just going to tell you right now, switching to their competitor is not going to be the magic bullet, right? Like I cannot tell you how many companies it's like, well, this one didn't work, but you know, now we're going to switch to these guys. And you're like, dude, like this, it's like, this is a process problem. And again, you touch on something, that I have been talking a lot about, and we can shift gears, talk about Gen AI a little bit. But, again, when you look at the business problems and again, kind of focusing on, okay, what can we deploy against that? Again, and I say this a lot, like maybe for this problem, it's actually a rewrite of the playbook.
Yeah.
And maybe for this problem, it's actually like, oh, there's some efficiency gains. So there could be a piece of technology, that comes in. But again, it's about looking at each individual role, each individual situation. And yeah, I mean, as we kind of like start talking about this a little bit, what I tell companies is stop asking yourself the question of what's our Gen AI strategy or our AI strategy. That's the same as saying, what's our internet strategy, right? Well, like, it depends, right? Like, again, like I guarantee, look, I wasn't in the workforce in like 1996 or so, but my guess is in 1996, they were asking that. They're like, well, how are we going to use this internet thing?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the conversations now. It's like, guys, it's how does this role use the internet? Like for this job, these are the 3 probable things that they're Googling. And again, but this is even before Google, right? This is how they're using it. And so that's how we try to simplify things. Like, guys, stop with this asking yourself what your Gen AI strategy is. It's like, for this role, what is it? So let's just jump into that. So obviously, Gen AI, to me, is not an IT problem. It's a department problem, right? And not problem is probably the wrong word, opportunity, right? Because I can just tell all of you, listen to me, do not let IT dictate your Gen AI strategy. They don't know. They don't know what a salesperson does. They don't know what this role does and this role. And so, we see people like, well, we are investing in Gen AI. We got Copilot. And you're like, dude, that's fine. But what about like agentics? And we'll get into all this stuff as well too. So what are some of the tactical or what are some of like the initial applications you're seeing of, like deeper AI or Gen AI with your clients?
Yeah, I think on the individual like seller level, I think sellers are hungry to try things that are going to help them be more productive. So I think you see a lot of experimentation going on there, like tons of just ChatGPT is incredibly helpful at making people better writers. I think Claude, Gemini, like all of them can do that. Yeah. And I think you end up writing a lot in your day-to-day, whether it's emails, whether it's preparing for phone calls or developing content. So I think there's a lot of just general writing that's going on. I've seen a lot of companies using Hyperbound. I don't know if you know Hyperbound. For the role play based training. I mean, that's a huge problem solve that we see having a great experience. And so I think sellers are kind of like, hey, let's get in the mix with this and let's get our hands dirty.
Sellers are so far ahead of the leaders. It's hilarious. Like, Gong was doing a presentation and we did our own surveying. Our surveying, we surveyed 281 sellers and sales leaders. And the ones that are using it, over 50% said it saves them 2 to 5 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I think it was like 28% said 5+, right? As a part of it. Gong had a stat I saw, like 85% of reps have used it or are using it actively, right? And I think reps, like to your point, they're already like, wait, hold on a second. Like, because again, writing is one. I think that to me, like the prep and research is another one. Like even for this interview, right? I immediately we have a custom GPT we built called Discovery Call Prep. So I'm like, Kevin Davis, boogieboard.ai, enter. And it's like, and I'm like, all right, tell me more, right? I'll share, I'll do like a screen share. I'll have them edit in the video of like what my prep looked like for this, because I think it'll be interesting for people. Are there applications you're seeing right now, or like, again, so you talked about writing, right? And then you talked a little bit about role playing, right? What we've seen with the role playing stuff, it's too soft. Like it's really good though at drilling personas. Like it drill you, and like so that's it for me. Like one of the tactical applications that I've been talking about is the onboarding and training. I'm convinced I think I can get an enterprise or mid-market rep ramped 2 to 3 times faster now, because I can have them drill the persona. I can create a custom GPT that has your buyer personas, it's got your products, your ICP, like all of these things, maybe your competitive analysis. And it's like your whole job in life is to train this person, create 15 question trivia games on rotating topics. To drill them on these things. Whereas, it used to take me having to listen to or run, I don't know how many calls. I could upload 15 Gong calls or whatever calls too. So to me, that's one of it. Are there other, like, what are some of the big ones that you're seeing? I mean, obviously, like, you run an AI company. And so what are some of the big ways that, your clients are integrating it, or, other areas where you're seeing where it's, really moving the needle.
Yeah, momentum is one of the big things that we see people having success with. Recording and like note taking, I would say in general.
Oh God,
like, there's documentation.
It's like the battle of the note takers on every Zoom now. It's like there's like as many. I feel like at a lot of these calls, there's literally as many note takers as there are humans.
I know. I've started to get into video editing now as we do stuff, and I keep forgetting like that I have to bounce these things before like I do video Zooms and that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay, it's these things that we learn throughout the way. But yeah, like that for me is still like incredible. I think on the like data infrastructure layer, like it used to always be that Salesforce was kind of the center of the architecture drawing.
Right.
Like it was always you draw Salesforce and you draw everything else.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing Snowflake. We're seeing other customer data platforms that are now the center of the drawing. Snowflake has some AI tools that you can use to kind of make your data more responsive.
Sure. Yeah.
To being that. And then there's derivative use cases of that, where Snowflake is now hooking into different engines, and I think over time that'll be kind of one of the more interesting AI pieces of this is how that layer builds out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I know that there really hasn't been a challenge to Salesforce or that data layer. I heard somebody told me there is some company who's trying to do it, and I was like, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, there's a couple. I was just at a conference this week, and we were going around the circle with different CEOs, and this guy was like, I'm building a CRM. I forget. I wish I knew his company. He's like, I'm building a CRM. We're going to unseat Salesforce. I was like, hell yeah, good for you.
Good for you, buddy. Good luck. How many billions have you raised, hopefully, for that one?
I didn't ask.
So what are some ways, so again, we talked about some of these like applications. What are some ways that it can enhance decision-making, right? And maybe, what are some ways that you see, people being able to be more effective, right? Whether it's around sales or operations in particular.
Yeah, from an ethos standpoint, I think we're in sort of a frantic time. Like the ZERP period ended. Things have been hard, like really hard. And then there's been this boom of speedy, new, powerful tech, right? And so it's tempting to go and zoom around and try to do a million different things. And so I believe it's the Navy SEALs that say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so when we see like the right organizations that are aligning and using the tech to do it, it's because they are going slow enough to understand what they're doing. They're willing to take their licks if stuff doesn't work and figure it out. And then eventually that over time just builds into a company that can move quickly.
Yeah, and I think the key is, another thing in there is sales has always kind of operated in a very like push, like big pushes, right? So like we deploy a playbook every 3 years, right? Yeah. Or something like that. Or we're going to redo our cadences every 6 months. And we're going to evaluate, and I think the world, and I talk about this in my book too, one of the 4 C's is consistent performance optimization. That I feel like sales has got to learn maybe from a little bit from like how performance marketing works, right? If you're spending $200,000 a month on Google ads, right? You are spending at least 20 to 40,000 of that on somebody or somebodies who are what's working, what's not working, tweak,
yeah.
Boom, performance, right? And what's the goal of that, right? If you're in B2B, the goal is to generate qualified meetings, okay? On the flip side, if you have $200,000 you're spending on SDRs, it's like part of this person's job, part of that person's job. People come to us all the time, Jake, we need 10 cadences. I'm like 10? How do you know it's not 100 or 500
yeah.
or like this? Like, I think, like, again, to me, like the tech is the same. It's like we have to start to realize in sales, like there is no like just set it and forget it state, right? Like we are always, and again, with a lot of our clients, it's like we're setting up these, like on the outbound, like, dude, bi-weekly, right? We built a product called Performance Pulse. It sits on top of Outreach, Sales Off, Gong, and a few others. And it just shows you, it's like, hey, what's the email I sent 2 days, like over the last 2 days, over 150 times that has a 20% or lower response rate? We got to kill that immediately.
Yes.
Not wait till real time. And I think the same thing is what you're saying with like the tech. It's like, okay, we're going to implement this. We're going to see how it goes. Then we're going to do this. And then we're going to do this. And like, we just have to build this rhythm in the organization of, again, and you can have a foundation, but it's also having a foundation for optimization, of like, it doesn't mean you're always like disrupting, because if you're doing some things behind the scenes, et cetera, the reps aren't going to feel it as much. But we have to just like, come on, like go a little bit more, I feel like in sales leadership. And I think that's what I'm most worried about for candidly, like a lot of sales leaders who are, I'm 44, right? Sales leaders that are like my age and older. It's like, dude, I know that shit worked in 2005 or 2010 or 11, but like, dude, you got to move like just faster.
Yes. It's so interesting you say that. It made me think of like what we see in our business is one of the questions that we'll get asked a lot. There's a couple that we'll get asked, how many accounts should a rep own? The answer, of course, is it depends. Another question is, how long should we keep territories in place? And it's a great question, but the answer is, again, it depends. Territories, like anything in your business that you're trying, is a hypothesis. How long is it going to take you to test whether or not they work? Right? So how long is your sales cycle? Is your sales cycle shrinking? Do you have a high volume part of your sales cycle that is rapid, that you can be reorienting territories quickly? When we first started the company, I was talking to people about self-driving territories. That's what I was calling it, because I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no human anymore. Like, you just push a button, Boogie Board will be changing your territories and account lists as
Oh, dude, managers probably had a fucking meltdown.
They thought I was a moron.
Yeah.
So we don't talk about that anymore.
But why wouldn't you? I guess like this is the point. You know who actually did do this was Yelp. Yelp did a good job. They built a tool internally where they also looked at like different reps' performance and did dynamic routing based on like Jake closes more of these types of restaurants.
Yeah.
Right. So like there are people that are thinking about it, but keep going.
I didn't know they did that. I mean, I think that's where we will move to. So I have a hypothesis that the business will get to that point, and we're building for that. It relies a lot on the data that you have available to you. So you need to be able to pretty clearly say that Jake manages, restaurants well. How does that relate to his official role within the company? How does that change his compensation package? Things that could be difficult to change. And then you have to make sure you have your restaurant data tight. But if you do, and you can, it's possible, you can be moving pretty quickly in a very focused manner. And you can, then Jake's gonna be pumped, right? He's the restaurant guy.
Well, yeah. And then again, I'm gonna get leads, and it's a win-win. I get leads that I'm actually able to close. The business closes more. Again, I think that there's this fairness, and again, I mean, you don't want to be. I think that's where territories just get so sideways. Is like, there's this implied fairness in how people think they're doing territories, but in reality, they're just stacking the deck so ridiculously, and certain mediocre reps favors at times as well too. So,
yeah, I have a lot of opinions on that piece of it. Like, we talk about equity versus equality. You have to be able to quantify the starting line that you're giving a rep so that you
100%.
So you can measure them right against each other, so that you
you can't have these reps that are already out here, and then your new hires get choked, right?
Right. Yep. But it's also not Hakuna Matata all day. Like, everybody's going to have the exact same opportunity. That's just, if you knew the exact opportunity that every account was going to give you, you wouldn't have to be doing this, right? So there's always some guess and check work going, but you can move to a more equitable model over time if you kind of define how you're doing balance and quantify what the health of a territory is.
I love that. All right, man. Well, look, we're about at time. What's next, man? Like, when you think about some of the things we're talking about moving faster, creating alignment across groups, different technologies, different AIs. I think a lot of people are like, okay, there's like so much now. Like I said, we're 2 years behind now, right? But what do you think about when you think about 2025, 2026? But what are some of like the top trends around this kind of team alignment, the use of technology there that you see being, critical? Yeah,
the main thing I think is this. I don't know if you've ever had anyone tell you that they're non-technical, or if you've ever said that, but you get on a call and say, I'm non-technical.
Yeah.
And they disqualify themselves by saying that. I think this notion of non-technical is going to be blown up, is going to be dead, because everybody that needs to elevate their careers, that needs to perform, is going to have to become technical. How that takes shape is going to be different for every company and every individual. Every role is going to move in that way, and every alignment is going to be based on that technical infrastructure that's underneath it. That's sort of the main piece that I think about from a philosophical standpoint for 2020.
Interesting, man. All right. Yeah, so technical, and again, and I think for a lot of you who are listening, it doesn't mean that you need to know all of the things. It means that you need to comprehend and understand what they're capable of. Like, that's how I think about being technical, right? Is like, and it's interesting, like with a lot of these technologies, it's like, why don't your teams get certified? If they're using them every day for hours a day, why wouldn't your team get certified in the tools? It's kind of, again, because we think of it as like, well, that's my ops person. It's like, well, if your rep is using outreach every day, wouldn't it make sense to spend 8 hours to certify them in outreach?
Absolutely.
To where they know everything about the tool?
Absolutely.
It's crazy, right? Though, but like, for some reason we think like, ops is over here, reps are here, as opposed to like it's this like, integrated. That I think that's actually a really, really good call out. The other thing that I'll add to that, I think trend wise, is again, at one of these conferences I was at, this guy's like, look, here are the skill sets. I can't remember if it's Bain or somebody, he was showing a slide. It's like the skill sets that are going to be less applicable, right? It's like analyst, like systems admin, like some of these tools where like Gen AI is like, and the trends, he's like, okay, what are the skill sets that are going to be in the highest demand? It's like strategic thinking, cleverness, right?
Cleverness.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is when the machine can get you to 80%, if you can't add the extra 20% of value or the massaging and the moving, like, okay, like this is interesting, but for this use case, it's like tweak, right? You're going to be in trouble, man. Like,
I love that.
Yeah, you're going to be in trouble. And so like for a lot of you, it's like, if you find yourself like right now, copying and pasting things that generative AI produces, and you're not spending 20, 30 minutes, again, depends on the project. Could be if it's, a few minutes for like streamlining like a basic communication, or if it's a, discovery call or something, it could be 15, 20 minutes tweaking, making it better, keeping going. That's the big trend that I think, and maybe it's not 2025, but 26, 27, 28, man, I think we're going to have a lot of people, white collar people who are going to struggle to stay employed.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand the tech. They didn't take the time to learn the tech. And then therefore they didn't kind of start to learn, how do I interact with this like thing? And the people that do, they might even be like technically not as capable or talented, but they know how to use it.
Yeah.
To become an A player, or, and just do more, right? I think like, again, like 5+ hours, 28% of people said 5+ hours a week it's saving them. That's like almost a month of productivity. That's real. And we're literally, it's October right now. We are ChatGPT is not even 2 years old. Like literally it's November of 2022.
Wow.
Right? Like we're so like in the first inning of this thing, man. Maybe even like still like, batting warm up, of this. So
yeah. And there was a beautiful point that you made in there about it. I now get to be clever. I now get to be curious,
yeah,
right? Like what a tremendous thing for me as a person, that I can kind of stop doing some of these things and elevate, think strategically. Yeah.
Think, man. And I'll give everyone like a real like practical application to this group I was speaking to yesterday. Big group of sales leaders. And we talk, one of the tactical applications we talk about is onboarding and continual development, right? So, I think that a frontline sales manager is going to be able to manage probably 20 to 30 reps in the future, because the little question, Jake, I've got this deal, da-da-da-da-da. If you can get out of your head how you do deal review, I can build a custom GPT for that.
Absolutely.
And so the use case I said is like, the power of this is like, I can literally build a 6-week training program for Jake. I'm struggling with executive presence or something on calls. And I can go to ChatGPT and be like, all right, here's what Jake is. All right, your job is to help me to build a 6-week training program for him. He's struggling here. This is what he's doing. Here's one of his calls. Here's like 2 or 3 of his transcripts. Build me a 6-week training program with 45-minute agendas with pre-work and post-work for both him and for me for every single session. That would take me to build that an hour and a half, maybe. I can now get V1 in 45 seconds and then spend the next 20 minutes making it like V4.
Absolutely.
That I never would have had time to do. And so this is why, to me, this is so critical that, we do use these tools. And then again, my friends, if you consistently find yourself copying and pasting, you are literally putting yourself out of a job.
Yes. Yes.
For a lot of folks. So, all right, man, final thoughts. Give them to me.
I'm just super optimistic. I think the last couple of years have been hard for a lot of people. I started a company. When you talk about territories, one of the things you go to the market with is like, we can help you grow. That was kind of what I started saying. It was the dumbest thing I could have said at that time, because everyone's like, dude, we need to like reduce. That's how I got into that focus world. But just talking to companies who are having to go through that hard period of learning, of changing, I think it's happening. I think people are really curious right now. I think they're getting really clever. And so I'm just pumped up. I'm really encouraged by what we're seeing in our business. We're going to be leaner. We're going to be in shape. We're going to be sexier.
That's right, yeah.
And, I'm just excited for where we're going to go.
I love it, man. Lean, tight, sexy. There you go.
That's us.
That's a good way to sum it up, man. So thank you. I appreciate it, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.